Story 1. I was a good kid, an average student, but well-behaved and a rule follower. Going on a field trip, the teacher, Mr. McDonald, was adamant that no glass was allowed on board the bus. I told my parents, and they went and bought me a plastic thermos to pack in my lunch. We stopped at a deli, and I got bologna and cheese with mustard. I packed everything into a paper bag and went to school. I was in 5th grade. The time came to depart for the trip, and we headed out. My paper bag ripped, and my thermos hit the floor with a glass-shattering sound. Mr. McDonald was on me instantly, absolutely screaming at me. I had never been reprimanded like that before, not before and not since. I had the broken pieces of thermos in my hand to show him that it wasn't glass and that it was just plastic. He wouldn't let me talk and just kept screaming at me about not knowing how to follow the rules. I was crying out of embarrassment and ran to the office to call Mom to come get me. I missed the field trip that I was actually looking forward to. Story 2. If you think you need a seating arrangement, you shouldn't be here. All because I had simply walked into my advanced placement psychology class and asked if we had a seating arrangement. Never felt so embarrassed or disrespected by a teacher before. Story 3. You should drop down to a regular class if this honors class is too much for you to handle, as I emailed her to tell her about the death of one of my best friends. Story 4. I had a teacher call me Robert Bear. I asked what it means. He said, "What's short for Robert?" Someone answered, "Bob." He then said, "What's bear in Spanish?" Someone said, "Oso." Then the teacher said, "Now put them together." And then it clicked. Boboso. Boboso is Spanish for, like, dumbass or idiot. Nice one, Mr. P. Story 5. My grandma was told she would end up working in a factory just like your mother. It was the 1940s. She earned an associate degree, bachelor's degree, and master's degree in special education, all while raising 5 kids. She was a teacher for over 30 years, and her former students would come up to us in public every time we went out somewhere. Now she has passed, but I am becoming a teacher. Just to praise her more, her mom raised her as a single mother. She eventually had a pretty abusive stepfather. My grandma experienced infant loss, which led to my dad being born. All of her kids were boys, and my dad was the youngest. My grandma was also 49 years sober when she passed. The loss of her 4th baby to sudden infant death syndrome was really tough on both my grandparents, but after my dad was born, my grandma turned everything around for herself. She was truly amazing, and I am in the process of writing a book about her that I hope to self-publish at some point. Story 6. The professor told me to be quiet and accept that the other students had every right not to like or trust me because of my disability. I told her I was getting bullied, being told to walk faster, and other things by other students. I walked with a cane at that point. Story 7. Had a math teacher tell me she knew I was cheating in high school after an increase in my test score. I got a tutor because I wasn't able to understand how she explained things. The girl that sat next to me always got A's and would help me sometimes, and she told me the day after we took a test that she knew I looked at the test of the girl next to me, and I obviously cheated. I asked her how that was possible when we sat in the front row, and she watched us take the exam. She told me not to try and turn it around on her, and that I would never amount to anything. Now I own a business and use math daily to manage other people's money. By every societal standard, I am more successful than she is. Still, accusing a 16-year-old of cheating when I worked hard to bump my grade made me think the world was against me for a while. Story 8. I had a very racist math teacher during my senior year of high school. We had 3 or 4 black students in my class. One of them was a pretty loud and energetic black girl. One day, she was talking really loudly with the girl next to her, and my teacher said, "It sounds like a screeching monkey in here." I honestly hated this teacher, and he looked like the anchovies from the television show SpongeBob SquarePants. Story 9. Teachers used to threaten me with "do well in school, or you'll end up working construction or driving a truck." My dad was a union carpenter, and my grandpa was a truck driver, both of whom made better livings than any public school teacher. Story 10. 9th grade art teacher walked by my desk and crushed my clay sculpture of a hand holding a grenade. She said, "That's not art." I said, Then neither is what you teach. I never did another assignment in her class but passed anyway. Story 11. In fourth grade, when I was struggling because my home life was terrible, my male teacher said, "It's okay, honey. You'll never be good at math." I finished an engineering degree with a concentration in math. Story 12. My fourth grade teacher, when I was 9, was my biggest bully. He told me a lot that I wasn't going to make it or be anything. It created a lot of fear in my mind about how life was to be. These days, I'm just shocked that a grown man could bully a child like that and crush someone's soul every day the way he did to me. Story 13. I was maybe in kindergarten or first grade and was going to a Christian private school. They had a vending machine that would sometimes eat your quarters. One day it happened to me, and I went up to my teacher to let her know so she could give me my quarter back. I guess she thought I was lying, and when she gave me my quarter, she said I should give it to my parents so they can pay my tuition bill. It stuck with me because I knew we were having money trouble, and my parents were trying really hard. Even at that age, I knew not to tell my parents anything. A few years later, I saw that same teacher working at a corn dog stand in the mall. Story 14. I had long hair and would wash it in the morning and go to school with it wet, so sometimes the front of my shirt would be wet. One day, when I walked into my first period English class, my teacher asked me if I was lactating in front of everyone. He was pretty young, and most of the kids really liked him because he was cool and had tattoos. I always thought he was a douche. He ended up getting an aggressive form of brain cancer and wrote a book before passing away. I'll never forget what he said to me, even though that was like 25 years ago. Story 15. My creative writing teacher said, "You are too ignorant to understand your writing sucks." My sister had him a year or two later. The first thing he did was ask if she was my sister, and he looked defeated when she said yes. But she added, "But I am nothing like her." They got along so well, and I just seethed inside. Story 16. Mine was a piano teacher. She was someone everyone in the neighborhood went to, and if you were her favorite, you excelled under her. Me, I wasn't a favorite, and I definitely learned things differently. We definitely butted heads, and she basically gave up teaching me theory. I went to her for 7 years, and one day, as she was frustrated with me, she blurted out, "You're never going to accompany anyone, not in a million years." I was so frustrated. I cried. My mom pulled me out of her lessons and set me up with someone else. She was much stricter, but I understood what she was teaching. I learned more from her in a year and a half than the other lady in 7. Now, whenever I accompany someone, I feel like I'm sticking it to her. Story 17. I was told that people like you do not become doctors. Way to inspire and support. They even forced me to change my A-level subjects. Well, it turns out I could become a doctor, and quite a good one as it turns out. I love my job and acted as a mentor for students who come from similar backgrounds to my own for a long time too. Story 18. An advanced placement European history teacher in high school told me I didn't deserve to be in the advanced placement program and my future wasn't looking bright. I ended up completing my Doctor of Philosophy degree and making excellent money working for a Fortune 100 company. Story 19. High school pitching coach, who was also my teacher, told me I was going to be a great AA manager someday. I went on to play Division I baseball, and now I'm not involved in the game any longer. I kind of wish he was right in hindsight. Story 20. I disliked my 7th grade English teacher. She was very strict, and if you weren't a perfect Catholic student, it was a private school, then you became her target. Story 21. We were sitting in a circle reading in 3rd grade. My nose started bleeding and she yelled, "That's what you get for picking your nose." I wasn't picking my nose. Everyone laughed at me. I was being abused at home, and this woman was making my safe place hell. Story 22. In high school, I was not really paying attention to what the teacher was talking about with one of my classmates, a black girl who was a cheerleader, but at one point she referred to her as having a weave, for whatever reason. The teacher was an old white lady, and the entire class got quiet except for a couple of uhas from a couple of students. After a minute or so, the girl starts to cry, and it was a whole thing for a while. Story 23. We had a project once to research our family history and design a coat of arms to incorporate what we learned and had a couple of weeks to do it. I spent a lot of time on it, doing the research and coming up with a design. I couldn't ever draw well and went through about a dozen sheets of poster board until I had something that I thought was presentable to go with my report. On the day we turned them all in, our teacher was going through them while we did a reading assignment, then interrupted us to show the whole class my poster as an example of why you shouldn't wait until the last minute to do an assignment, as it looked so bad. I was a straight A student at that point, and it crushed me, and I never tried anything artistic again while I was in school. Story 24. That actually Lolita seduced Humbert Humbert. I was giving a song analysis presentation in my advanced placement literature class when I was 17, and my song of choice was Gothic Lolita by Emily Autumn. I was sexually abused as a child, and that song did a lot to help me cope. Screaming lyrics like, "If I am Lolita, then you are a criminal, and you should be killed by an army of little girls," got a lot of anger out of me safely. The teacher knew I'd been sexually abused when she said that in front of the class. I'm waiting for her to die so I can dump my piss on her grave. I can't forgive that. Story 25. My teacher told me to stop trying because I was going to grow up to be a drug dealer. I ran into her the other day, and she was surprised how well I have been doing. I've made more money in 1 year than she has in her entire life. She told me she was proud of me. I'm kidding. I have a really good job and went to law school. Story 26. My friend was at her first internship for early childhood in her first semester of college, and she was struggling a little bit at the beginning. Her professor asked her if that was truly the profession she wanted to pursue. In my senior year in high school, my personal finance teacher, who was very harsh to all of us, asked on the first day who had a job and who didn't. There were some 15-year-olds who didn't have a job, and he seriously asked, "Why are you even here?" Story 27. Mrs. Clark in 3rd grade started berating one of my classmates, saying in her British accent, "You stupid, stupid boy." I never forgot her. She was a horrible woman. Story 28. 8th grade English. We weren't being particularly bad, but certainly not angels. The teacher had some sort of mental breakdown and took it out on us. All I really remember is him shouting, "You need me. I don't need you." And then we all sat there in stunned silence because honestly, what? Story 29. A teacher or principal once told me that no other school would ever accept me and that I was broken due to depression. She also told me that I would never make it someday. She used to call me into her office just to talk down to me. Eventually, I told my mom and moved schools. I'm currently 32 with a successful career and living life to the fullest. But I still think of her words. Story 30. My 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Clark, took out a big cat-shaped cushion that was in our classroom. I sat on it every day to read. When I asked where Fat Cat was, she told me she had him burned. My classmates and I started bawling. Mrs. Clark went on a leave of absence for an ulcer that year. I remember that too. Story 31. When I tried to tell her I was being abused, she said, "Now I don't know what goes on at home, but I do know she feeds you, keeps a roof over your head, drives you to tutoring." This was a teacher I trusted. Story 32. My 1st grade teacher told me I was stupid and lazy and going to fail out of high school like my dad. What she said is terrible. But it was so terrible, my parents got me tested. It took hundreds of hours of vision therapy, but I learned to read. If she had been kinder, it might have taken a lot longer to figure out. I am very lucky and privileged. I have wonderful parents, and I ended up with an amazing optometrist who fixed me. Story 33. My 8th grade teacher would make fun of my naturally curly hair. She would laugh at me in front of all my classmates. She was the hot teacher. I'm 51 now, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. Story 34. One morning a teacher overheard me saying I felt sick. She asked me in front of the class if I was pregnant. I was not and told her that. She then went on to ask 3 other classes she taught if anyone knew if I was pregnant, creating a rumor that I was pregnant. Story 35. That because I came from a poor family and was a female, I would always have to work twice as hard in life, and I should get used to the idea of marrying up if I couldn't put in the work every time for everything. A male English teacher at a religious boarding school in 1986. What did I do? I always had that in the back of my mind and really doubted myself. Froze at every chance to rise above my situation and married a terrible man who made sure of it. In short, this teacher messed me up a bit, and I hope he is in a special place in hell where he has to grade freshman English students forever. Story 36. Not one specific thing, but it was repeatedly mistaking a lack of understanding. Despite attending tutoring in and out of school and taking every extra opportunity offered, for lack of effort and making a big fuss about how I just don't try. I was crying myself to sleep over not understanding basic concepts, but they were so determined on it being a behavioral issue that every attempt to improve was seen as me wasting the time of people who want to be here. Story 37. You are so thick you will need help filling out your benefit application. And Finch, Welsh teacher. 10 years later, I was dating a teacher at my old school and bumped into her at a work night out. I really enjoyed telling her I am an engineer and I make more than her.